Don Lemon made some comments that gave him a firestorm of criticism from the right. Let's take a look at what he said, and then we'll discuss.
Cover it because we were distracted by another extremist that was doing bad things in the name of hate.
Yeah, and then now another one. And you have all of them in a row. And, you know, we messaged about this a little bit this weekend. I keep trying to point out to people not to demonize any one group or any one ethnicity, but we keep thinking that the biggest terror threat is something else. Some people who are marching, you know, towards the border like it's imminent. And when the last time they did this, a couple hundred people came and they, you know, most of them did get into the country. Most of them got tuckered out before they even made it to the border. So we have to stop demonizing people and realize the biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized to the right. And we have to start doing something about them. There is no travel ban on them. There is no ban on, you know, they have the Muslim ban. There is no white guy ban. So what do we do about that? So, and first of all, let me just say this. Maurice Stollard is the name, and Vicky Jones, and they have been lost in all of this. Two people who were killed on Wednesday that you talked about. They have been lost about this, and I know that people feel that this story has not gotten enough coverage, and we will honor them tonight in our program. But go on, Chris, sorry.
Good. No.
So the response was probably exactly how you're envisioning it. People were like, oh, wow, that makes no sense. You just said we need to stop demonizing people. And by the way, white men are the problem. And there's no travel ban or white guy ban or anything, implying that, hey, maybe there should be a travel ban or a white guy ban. Now, first, I want to break this down into a few separate parts. First, I just want to get to the raw data and what the numbers show. And then I'll talk about my own take on it. So this is according to The Atlantic. They say, according to the latest data from the Anti-Defamation League Center on Extremism, white supremacists were responsible for more than half of the 34 fatalities linked to domestic extremists of all stripes last year, claiming 18 lives in 2017. That represented a reversion to the long-term trend. Right-wing violence had accounted for the largest share of domestic extremist-related killings every year from 1995 until the Pulse nightclub shooting in 2016. Global totals may tell a different story, but in the United States, far-right extremist murders far exceed those carried out by Islamic extremists over the last decade. 71% of all murders were carried out by right-wing extremists, and 26% can be linked to Islamic extremists. Now, those numbers don't tell the whole story because Muslims in the U.S., they represent about 1% of the population, less than 1%, I think. So to have 26% be tied to Muslim extremists, there's a giant overrepresentation on that front. So that needs to be pointed out when we discuss these statistics. 71% of all murders being carried out by right-wing extremists. Those are overwhelming numbers, but it is also true that there's a lot of right-wing people in this country, a lot of far right-wing people, a lot of far right-wing white guys. So even though it's an overwhelming number, that doesn't necessarily tell the whole picture, but it is true that when you go to the raw data, yes, that is the biggest terror threat. It just is. It just is. And I think it's fair to point that out because numbers don't lie, and truth is always a defense, okay? So I do think that aspect of what Don Lemon is talking about is fair, and he came out the next day, and he basically doubled down, and he was like, yeah, listen, I didn't stutter. Here are the numbers. And again, let me be clear, if you don't trust the Anti-Defamation League's numbers, there's other numbers from the Department of Homeland Security and from the U.S. government which back that up and which say, yeah, no, the biggest domestic terror threat is from right-wing extremists in the U.S. Okay. All fair enough to this point. Now, here's the part where he loses me. And it actually depends on what he meant by it. And he didn't clarify it. Which was a little annoying. But he said, oh, we need to stop demonizing people and white men are the problem. There is a contradiction there, and that doesn't make sense. Because if you want to stop demonizing people, you also need to stop demonizing white men. And I think everybody saw that contradiction, and they were like, what the fuck, dude? Now, then when he goes on to talk about we don't have a travel ban, we don't have a white guy travel ban or anything like that, It all depends on what he meant when he said that. If he was saying that as in, like, I'm being tongue-in-cheek, obviously I'm not in support of a white guy travel ban, and he's linking that back to, oh, the president floated a Muslim travel ban, and a lot of people thought that was okay, when that's pretty fucking bigoted, and it would also be bigoted to say, let's do like a white guy travel ban. So therefore, I'm going to draw this parallel, and then you're going to walk right into my trap by... A lot of people supported that Muslim travel ban, but got really angry at the proposition of a white guy travel ban. So you walked right into Don Lemon's trap where he's like, exactly, that was my point. So if that's what he meant by that, then I think he's totally right. But in the small percentage chance that he actually like meant it literally, like, no, seriously, we should probably like have anti-white man policies, well, then of course that would be wrong. And the thing is, I'm inclined to believe just by the context of what he's saying, he of course doesn't mean let's have a white guy fucking travel ban or something like that. But I just couldn't tell because I'm a very literal dude, and I sensed nothing in his tone that was joking. It was just like, it sounded very somber and serious and to the point. And so I was like, whoa, does he mean that? Like, does he really think there should be policies like that? Because that's crazy. So I think that he probably should have clarified that point for idiots like me who are not good at sensing if it's sarcasm or whatever. But as far as the raw data, it's actually even worse than what he's laying out, because what he's talking about is just domestic terrorism. I think that when you broaden the conversation to committing the most violence, well, then you can add mass shootings into the picture, which it's not political in nature or religious in nature, but it's just like run-of-the-mill violence, if you will. And when you look at that, I think it's over 60% of mass shootings are committed by white men. So it's actually the threat, the relative threat is even more than what he's laying on. But then, of course, the final point is, and everybody should know this, but I'll point it out because it should be pointed out, even though it's relatively obvious. That doesn't mean... And this isn't the case for white men, this isn't the case for Muslims, this isn't the case for right-wingers. Of course, it doesn't mean that we should speak about this as if it's not the case that most people in these respective groups are bad people. In other words, it can be the case that, there's Muslim fundamentalist terrorism, but most Muslims are not terrorists. It could be the case that it's disproportionate Muslim fundamentalist terrorism, but most Muslims aren't terrorists. It could be the case that, the biggest domestic terrorism threat is from far right-wing white men, but that's actually not the case that most white men are the problem, or even that most right-wing white men are the problem, because they're not. So I think that that nuance gets lost on a lot of people, and that's why I think a lot of people were triggered by this. Because the way he said it, he was like, oh, stop demonizing people, and white men are the problem. What's funny is that the nuance that those right-wing people were begging Don Lemon for is the same nuance that the left begs the right for when there's some sort of Muslim fundamentalist terror attack. And, my take is I support the nuance across the board. I support that, hey, listen, it ain't all of them. And I know that some people think, well, that point is so obvious that it shouldn't even have to be made. But listen, sometimes people are not that bright. And sometimes people are very literal-minded. I know because I'm guilty of it myself. So it would behoove you to always give all the information and all the data and not just harp away like a demagogue on, the problem is the Muslims or the problem is the right-wing white men. No, let's be reasonable across the board here, and we'll realize that the overwhelming majority of most groups of people are really good people. I say most because let's not kid ourselves that like a gathering of Nazis, that most of them are good people. No, they're not. Most of them are bad people. A gathering of, Salafi jihadists. Like, oh, yeah, they're mostly good people. No. There are some groups where it's like, yeah, you're bad. But the overwhelming majority of most groups are actually decent people.